The story of Joseph, a journey from the pit to the palace. Genesis 37-50. In the land of Canaan lived a man named Jacob, also called Israel, and among his 12 sons, there was one whom he loved more than the rest, Joseph, the son of his old age, born to him by his beloved wife Rachel. Genesis 37 verse 3. Jacob gave Joseph a richly ornamented robe, a coat of many colors. And when his brothers saw how their father favored him, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Genesis 37 verse 4. One day, Joseph had a dream. In it, he and his brothers were binding sheaves of grain in the field, and suddenly his sheaf stood upright while theirs gathered around and bowed to his. Genesis 37 verses 6-7. In another dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. Genesis 37 verse 9. He told these dreams to his family, and their jealousy burned even brighter. Whole betrayal in the pit. Genesis 37 verses 12-36. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers in the fields near Shechem. But when they saw him coming from a distance, they plotted against him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said. "Let's kill him and see what becomes of his dreams." Genesis 37 verses 19-20. But Reuben, the eldest, tried to rescue him. So instead, they stripped off his robe and threw him into a dry pit. Later, when a caravan of Ishmaelite traders passed by, Judah suggested, "Let's sell him instead." So for 20 pieces of silver, they sold Joseph and watched the traders take him away to Egypt. Genesis 37 verse 28. To cover their sin, they dipped Joseph's robe in goat's blood and brought it to their father. Jacob wept bitterly, believing his beloved son was dead. House Joseph in Potiphar's house. Genesis 39. In Egypt, Joseph was sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. And the Lord was with Joseph, so he prospered, even as a slave. Genesis 39 verse 2. Potiphar saw the favor of God on Joseph and made him overseer of his entire household. But trouble soon came. Potiphar's wife tried to seduce Joseph, but he refused her advances. "How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Genesis 39 verse 9. She falsely accused him, and Joseph was thrown into prison. Change Joseph in prison. Genesis 40. Even in prison, God was with Joseph. The warden put him in charge of the other prisoners. One day, two of Pharaoh's servants, the cupbearer and the baker, were thrown into the same prison. They each had troubling dreams, and Joseph, through God's wisdom, interpreted them. Genesis 40 verse 8. To the cupbearer, he said, "In 3 days you will be restored." To the baker, he warned, "In 3 days you will be executed." Both interpretations came true. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him when he returned to Pharaoh, but the man forgot. For 2 more years, Joseph remained in prison. Crown Joseph before Pharaoh. Genesis 41. Then one day, Pharaoh himself had 2 disturbing dreams, one of 7 fat cows eaten by 7 thin cows, and another of plump heads of grain devoured by thin, scorched ones. None of Pharaoh's magicians could explain them. Then the cupbearer remembered Joseph. Pharaoh summoned him, and Joseph said, "It is not I, but God who gives the interpretation." Genesis 41 verse 16. He explained, the dreams meant that 7 years of abundance were coming, followed by 7 years of severe famine. Pharaoh was so impressed, he made Joseph ruler over all Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. Genesis 41 verses 39-41. At just 30 years old, Joseph wore Pharaoh's ring, rode in his chariot, and oversaw the land. Genesis 41 verse 46. Sheet of rice, the famine and reunion. Genesis 42-45. When the famine came, it struck all lands, including Canaan. Jacob sent his sons to Egypt to buy grain. They bowed before Joseph, not recognizing him, just as the dreams had foretold. Joseph tested them, accusing them of being spies, demanding they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin. When they returned with Benjamin, Joseph could no longer hold back his tears. He cleared the room and said, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" Genesis 45 verse 3. His brothers were terrified, but Joseph wept and embraced them. "You meant it for evil," he said, "but God meant it for good, to save many lives." Genesis 50 verse 20. House with garden. Joseph reunited with Jacob. Genesis 46. Jacob, amazed that Joseph was alive, traveled to Egypt with his entire household, 70 in all. Pharaoh welcomed them and gave them the land of Goshen. There, Jacob blessed his sons and died peacefully, and Joseph buried him in Canaan as he had promised. Coffin. Joseph's last words. Genesis 50 verses 22 to 26. Joseph lived to see his great-grandchildren, and before his death, he made the Israelites swear, "God will surely come to your aid, and you must carry my bones up from this place." Joseph died at 110 years old, and he was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. Compass conclusion. Joseph's story is one of betrayal and forgiveness, suffering and exaltation, but above all, divine purpose. Through every trial, God was with Joseph, and what man meant for harm, God used for good, a truth that still echoes through time. Genesis 50 verse 20.